Good afternoon to all, and thank you for inviting me to this workshop. Before talking about the restoration of the former saltworks per se, I think it is important to understand that, if I can get, that the study site, what is shown here by the red limit, is located in the Rhone Delta in the south of France, but it's located in an area that is very recent. It was built on the sea only 400 years ago, so it's still highly dynamic from a geomorphological point of view. You can see that we are losing 6 meters of coastline per average every year in the south, and we gain towards the west up to 14 meters per year. So in addition to this erosion and accretion, the whole delta and the study site is located more or less at 1 meter of altitude. So it's also very vulnerable to sea level rise. The former saltworks that we call the site is because there was some salt exploitation, but it's only part of it, the most recent one and the least modified, that was transformed only about 50 years ago. And these lagoons were actually used for only the pre-concentration of salt. So the way it was working, the seawater was being pumped here, and then it would transit in the different lagoons until getting more and more salty until this area where the salt was collected. And so the legacy of the salt exportation, or the state of the site when we get an opportunity to restore it, was that the water level were highly controlled in each lagoon, and these levels were opposite to the natural cycle, being low in winter and high in summertime. Aquatic communities were simplified as a result of the increasing salinities over the summer period. There were limited biological exchanges among the lagoons that were separated by dikes and water sluices. And the site as a whole was completely pulverized, being disconnected from the Rhone River, from the sea, and also from the lagoons around it. So you can see that in 2008 and over the few following years, the saltwork company decided to keep this yellow area, but to sell this red part that we call the former saltwork. And the French Coast Conservancy, that became the new landowner, designated the regional nature park, the National Reserve de Camargue, and the Reserve Tour du Valat as co-managers of this site. The idea was that we would be, let's say, more successful if we were 3 different bodies, 1 public, 2 private, with different expertise to lead these restoration and management action on a site that is quite complex. So the first thing we did was to launch diagnostic studies. First one on hydrology and topobatimetry to understand how we could actually restore the site from a hydrological point of view. We also did studies on the habitat as well as biodiversity that was found in this area. That was in total over 6,000 hectares. And we also did some socioeconomic study to better understand what were the perspectives for development for this peculiar area. So based on these 3 studies, we agreed on 5 main management orientation that I will detail briefly. So the first one, and probably the most important, was to restore a more hydrological functioning by reconnecting the site to the sea in the south and also to the neighboring hydro system, namely the Vacares Lagoon, which is a major lagoon we have in the Camargue. And to do this, well, we had different hydraulic work that were done, especially along a hydrological axis, connecting the land to the sea. And these works were done mostly in 2 periods, in 2015, thanks to a LIFE program, and in 2019, thanks to funding from the WWF France. The second objective was to restore the natural ecosystem that are characteristic of these coastal area, namely salt steppes or saliconia marshes, as well as temporary lagoons. And this was done mostly, we didn't need to actually transplant the plant as we've seen this morning because they were already present or very close to the site. So just by reconnecting the hydrology of the lagoons and by promoting natural water cycle, these plants develop naturally. A third objective was to maintain or increase the carrying capacity for breeding colonial water birds, and this was done by creating new islets for the flamingos and for shorebirds. We also look at in beach areas to protect those sites selected by the little tern for nesting from disturbance by visitors and ducks mostly. A fourth objective was also implementing adaptive management to sea level rise. And we had the chance to have here a dike that is the protection dike against the sea for the goods and people. And here we had this seafront dike that had been built by the salt company, but that was no longer really useful. And you can see it's located here now at sea, at least in these areas that are most submitted to erosion. So we made the decision not to maintain this dike because we could build on this one to protect the people. And the idea is to use these wetland here, which just correspond about to 4 kilometers as a buffer zone to protect against sea surge and sea storms. So what happened is that the breaches were more and more numerous, more and more permanent. So more seawater was entering during storms. This had also an impact on the inner dikes that had not been built to resist to these wave action. It was making our work of managers more complicated, but we decided to let it go because it also increased hydrological connectivity, which was a major objective of the restoration. And the good thing is that when the sea comes in, it also brings sand, so that in those very eroded area, we now have a new beach that is being formed. In other words, by collapsing, this seafront dike allowed the coastal dynamic to be restored. So the coast is retreating, but it is building on sands as it was before, and the natural dynamic is in place. And we think that this way will be better equipped for resisting to, or not resisting, but for adapting to sea level rise. A fifth objective is to contribute to sustainable development. And so for that, we have users doing traditional use, such as waterfowl hunting, fishing, but we also have plenty of different types of people coming. The site is open, free to the public, so bird watchers, people coming to hike, bike, and do seaside activities in the summertime. So we are following an adaptive management process, which means that we need to assess the success of these restoration action. And we do that through different monitoring schemes that have been implemented over time, knowing that we are currently doing a second management plan for the site that is capitalizing onto these this monitoring and these assessments. So we can make the difference also between what we would call active restoration in the north, where we can, for instance, control the water level very precisely, versus passive restoration, where we let the geomorphology just moving naturally. We have been also keen enough to hire a professional photographer to do a landscape survey. And this is, I think, a very good idea because, well, everybody knows that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here we have, for instance, the recovery of the vegetation along the canal that we're bringing the sea water and how it evolves in only 8 years period. We have been also monitoring marsh vegetation by remote sensing, and we can see that already in the first 4 years, we had nearly 300 hectares of Salicornia marshes spreading in the area just by restoring the natural water cycles. The birds associated with these salt marsh came a bit with some delay, but we can see that they have been steadily increasing since 2014, especially in those areas where we did active restoration, although they also come into the passively restored area, and but much less in the area that was not restored. We have been monitoring also the nesting colonial water birds on these islets that we built, and we did monitor not only breeding pairs but also their breeding sexes. We have been monitoring the progression of aquatic vegetation and benthic invertebrates into the different lagoons, which showed an increased diversity in terms of invertebrates and colonization by Zostera and also Rupia in many lagoons. We also do, of course, bird monitoring, which is a bit the specialty of Tour du Valat. So we currently have over 300 species that are regularly, that have been observed at the site, including more than 200 that are regularly observed, more than 50 species breeding regularly, including 2 of national importance. And the site is also very good for migration and wintering birds, where we can have often more than 10,000 birds that are being observed, including 4 species of national importance. But the big winner of this restoration process are the fish. We have been monitoring them using fake nests at different areas indicated by the blue dots along this hydrological path that we have created, which allow us to confirm that the site now, before the restoration, the site could be pumped. The fish were pumped into the site in 1 or many pieces, and they would die by the increasing salinity. But today they can come freely from the sea, just that they use this lagoon a lot as a nursery area. We have also species that are there year-round, typical lagoon species that are associated with brackish water. And we also have migratory species such as the European eel that will use the site to get access to the land or to get access back to the sea for breeding in the Sargasso Sea. In terms of site frequentation, we are recruiting eco-guards every summer period. There are 4 of them who spend 2 or 3 months just wandering at the site to meet with people, make sure that they do respect the regulations and increase their awareness about the need to conserve nature. There are so many people close to the beach area that we had to specially segregate the different activities to ensure people's securities and enjoyment as well. And so every year we have about more than 1,000 visitors that are being interviewed, and you can see here why they come to the beach. It can be for why they come to the site. It can be for the beach or for camping or kite surf or just birding and so on. We have been also involved into the restoration of built heritage, which is a bit different from restoring nature, but the landowner is very good at it because they have experience. And for instance, we had an old tower, a guard tower that has been restored, where you have an upper deck that allows you to have a very nice view of the Camargue. And only during the 2 summer months, we had nearly 30,000 cars or bikes coming to enjoy this site. So the key challenges to come, because it's never over, even if most of the restoration has been done, it's to continue or even to better accompany socially these changes and the evolution of perception at the local level, because especially regarding sea level rise, because it's a subject that is scaring people a lot, that it's normal. We always need to monitor and quantify when we manage a site, but in this case, the site is evolving very quickly, so we constantly need to evaluate the possible future of the site. Otherwise, we can launch actions that are just obsolete a few years later, and this is not always easy. We need to reconcile the issues related to the rewilding process, the freedom of public access, which is very important in the Camargue, and also risk management, because the site can change a lot when just with the weather and when you have sea storms and with these dikes that are being eroded and so on. And we have been also a bit victim of our success with the fish. So that now we have a lot of fishing being done in the lagoon by people coming from far away in boats. It's not really illegal because it's considered as part of the maritime public domain, but we consider that it's not sustainable and we would like it to benefit more to the local people. So we need to find a way to regulate this. And last but not least, we also need to secure human and financial resources for site management because it's a big site. It costs a lot, only just the maintenance of these hydraulic works. And during the different restoration phases, we were lucky to get quite a lot of money, but now that we are entering into, let's say, a routine management phase, it's a bit less sexy for the funders, and it's a constant challenge to secure the human resources and financial resources.